Growing up during the launch of the 32-bit era of consoles was an exciting time. As the focus shifted from 2D to 3D gaming, it opened a new world for genres and had me eagerly anticipating the possibilities for flight games, which were largely out of my grasp on expensive PCs at the time. Needless to say, air combat was on my radar and looked to be everything I dreamed of, putting you in the cockpit of a fighter jet in full 3D, all behind the power of the new PlayStation hardware. Today, we take a look back at air combat. Air Combat was developed and published by Namco in September of 1995, a launch title for the US release of the Sony Playstation. It's also notably the first console release in the long-running Ace Combat series. Air Combat is an action flight shooter where you take on the role of a mercenary pilot, tasked with retaking a nation controlled by terrorists. And the task at hand is simple: fly around, engage and eliminate enemy personnel. Kill. Period.
バババババババ緊急事態緊急事態バババババババババあ、失礼いたしました。ちょっと昔の悪い癖が出てしまいまして。
You take to the sky in over 17 different missions, with varying objectives of eliminating air-to-air and air-to-ground targets, with an arsenal at your disposal of up to 16 real-world aircraft, ranging from the starting F-14 Tomcat, Soviet MiGs, and even the iconic F-117 Nighthawk stealth bomber. Most of the airplanes you would want are here, but don't get too excited yet. That is, if you're looking for a true flight sim experience. This is an arcade-style game at its heart, the first clue probably being the loadout of 65 missiles. The technical details have been pushed aside in favor of pure combat, and with that, the gameplay differences between planes are mostly focused on speed and maneuverability, with the same loadout and general mission objectives required for each. Overall, it doesn't take itself too seriously, and swings the needle towards the action scale instead of realism. The game's music fits perfectly with the arcade action, and it's easily a standout feature which helps add to the game's fun atmosphere. Graphically, the game reflects the fact that it's an early PlayStation title, with low detail environments that suffer from a lot of draw-in, only redeemed by the fact that the game runs silky smooth. But your attention will probably be scanning the skies, battling it out in air combat. So let's load up and jump into the action. The game wastes no time throwing you into combat. You immediately start the first mission behind two enemy targets, which are already in lock-on range for missiles. No takeoff sequence or flying to waypoints here. Straight to the point. You also start off in a cockpit view, and this is my preferred way to play the game. The game offers a third-person view, but it lacks details such as airspeed, altitude, and your radar screen. These aren't crucial to the gameplay, but I much prefer flying and dogfighting with the HUD display. The combat itself is pretty straightforward. Once within what I assume is 1,000 meters, you can obtain a missile lock on your target. Fire your missiles and blow them out of the sky. You can fire 2 missiles at a time, and most targets take 2 to 3 hits to destroy. Your plane also comes loaded with a machine gun, but with such a large number of missiles given to you for each mission, you can easily blast through the game without ever using it. However, it's pretty fun to use and is ultimately more satisfying, if not entirely necessary. Unfortunately, the missiles and machine guns are the only weapons available, and the same loadout is used on all airplanes. My excitement at getting the F-117 stealth bomber was quickly dashed when I realized it still functioned just like my F-14. The same goes for the mighty A-10. The game offers no bombs, unguided missiles, or rockets, and treats all aircraft the same in this regard, no matter the mission or objectives. After getting some airtime under my belt, I was increasingly disappointed with the default controls. They feel very stiff and rigid, akin to flying a plane with training wheels. Thankfully, the game offers a second, expert control option. This adds yaw control and doesn't auto-level your plane. It just offers a much more fluid and overall better feel of flying. As for missions, the game offers 17, with an overworld map highlighting different ones that you can accept. These are mostly linear, but eventually offers branching paths, so some are technically not required to beating the game. Each mission offers a monetary reward for completion, and also unlocks new planes available for purchase with this reward. Each plane you buy also acts as your lives. Fail a mission and lose your plane and it's gone for good. but with the differences between each mostly focused just on speed and maneuverability, losing a plane is not a huge blow. As you load up the game, you are introduced to the game's story. A well-organized and armed terrorist organization has carried out a coup d'etat on an unnamed country. You, as one of the premier Top Gun pilots in the world, has been hired to put a stop to this insurrection. Before each mission, you are given a short briefing on the objectives and targets required for completion, with the vast majority being search and destroy missions of air-to-air and air-to-ground targets, ranging from enemy bombers and fighters to strategic ground targets such as oil refineries and fuel depots. Although you encounter a number of secondary targets that aren't required to complete each mission, eliminating them will give you extra money and makes completing each mission that much easier. But overall, the presentation of the story and mission briefings seem like a relic of the 16-bit days, and could have been done better. You're also given the option to purchase a wingman for some missions, but from my experience they do absolutely nothing and are a waste of resources. What on earth is he doing? The environments themselves are, in a word, ugly. Most levels are barren with lots of pop-in and warping. The textures of the canyon levels, for example, make these way harder than it needs to be. There's just an overall lack of detail or cool distinctive landmarks throughout the game. The night level is one of the few that stand out visually and stylistically, as well as the bridge level, which is one of the game's most memorable and iconic. I wish more levels featured more unique and visually distinctive objects, but even with these downfalls, the core gameplay is fun, which helps overlook these flaws. As for the combat, chasing down and outmaneuvering enemy fighters is done somewhat well, but you will spend the vast majority of your time flying in circles as you attempt to get on their six. They get progressively harder as you get deeper into the game, and although I wouldn't call the game especially difficult, it provides just enough of a challenge to keep you coming back for more. Simple strategies of quick, fast strikes on ground targets will eliminate them with no problems. Accelerating and banking away from enemy fighters that have a missile lock or launch will keep you safe in the air. With the annoying cockpit sound that goes on way too long as one of the best deterrents for avoiding taking damage.
Alert, body damage. Alert, body damage.
With enough practice and understanding of the combat, you can easily complete the game without dying, using just the starting F14. The game also allows you to save from the overworld at any time. Although this doesn't seem like it should be noteworthy, this is surprisingly absent in a number of early PlayStation titles. In true Namco fashion, you can also enter a code to activate a loading screen minigame, but I'll admit I have no idea what you're supposed to do here. So after progressing through the game, you eventually set up the final battle with the enemy giant airborne fortress. This is the only boss type enemy in the game, and also the only fictional aircraft, as far as I can tell. This is a mammoth 4-engine plane with a bevy of weapons. However, the battle itself isn't much of one. Simply flying behind the craft and eliminating its rear-firing missiles renders it harmless. Although it has an escort fighter, you can easily destroy the air fortress before suffering any debilitating damage. So after eliminating the air fortress engines and unloading your missiles on the craft itself, it explodes and the game is complete. You are given your congratulations. The enemy has capitulated and the coup has failed. You are then treated to the end credits, ending the game. Although air combat lacks some of the more refined touches and details you would come to expect, it delivers the fun core gameplay of the Ace Combat series, with combat that is easy to jump straight into, all set to a rocking soundtrack that goes hand in hand with the action on screen. It's easy to see why this title launched a successful franchise, and is a strong showing for such an early PlayStation title. In its time, Air Combat was released to both commercial and critical success. GameFan gave the game scores ranging from 88 to 95. IGN gave the game a 7 out of 10. And GamePro gave the game a 3.5, stating, "Despite Air Combat's substantial flaws, patient arcade shooter fans will gradually get caught up in the gripping gameplay." From a collecting aspect, aside from the original long box release, the game was also released in a greatest hits as well as a jewel case variant, which can easily be obtained for around $10. So that's a look back at Air Combat. Although rough around the edges, it laid the groundwork for what the series would become, and is worth a spin for fans of the genre. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.
エアコンバットです。迫力のあるドッグファイトお楽しみください。キーンババババババ